The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got. They're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
First place. Yeah. Commanders go a week without scoring a touchdown, become only the second team in NFL history to give up 3 touchdowns in a game and not score one themselves and win. And what do you know? Thanks to an old friend, Kirk Cousins, Washington is tied for first place in the NFC East. Okay, I understand it's a dubious first place, but it's first place. And enjoy it while you can, because it's on to Cincinnati, where they're 7.5-point underdogs, and probably a dose of reality coming on Monday night. But for now, why not enjoy it? And why not enjoy silencing the Eagle fans last night as Kirk Cousins did? That was absolutely incredible what happened at the end of the game. And Nick Sirianni, who really came into the season on a hot seat because his team started off 10-1 and collapsed at the end of last season. And now to lose a game like that at home and the questionable call on third down, yeah, Saquon Barkley makes that catch, and he should have. Game's over, they win. But what are you doing? What are you doing throwing the ball in that situation? Atlanta's out of timeouts, and you can run a lot more off the clock. They did not do that. So after they kicked the field goal to go up by 6, you're leaving enough time for Kirk Cousins to go down the field, especially the way the Eagles played defense. You know, that was just insane that Kirk Cousins even said something about it after the game, like, I really had a lot of time to throw, and he winds up throwing the game-winning touchdown pass at the end of the game, and there you go. That's just an unbelievable way that it ends for Philadelphia. So afterwards, Scott Van Pelt, the excellent host of the Monday Night Countdown show and the post-game show that he does after every game, talked with Troy Aikman and Joe Buck, who called the game. And, yeah, you saw it. They saw it.
Well, we all saw it. If Saquon Barkley is able to make that catch, then it's a brilliant call, and they run out the clock, and they go into the locker room as winners.
Like the call? You like the call, Troy?
Well, it's a risk-reward call, right? Okay. It's not what I expected. I thought, it was a play in which you get Hurts outside. If it's there, take it. If it's not, you keep it and you go to the ground, let the clock run, and then make your decision. But he was open, and they don't execute it. It's the National Football League, so it's you're playing to win, you're playing aggressively, you get exactly what you want, and then it's just simply not executed. And obviously there's going to be a lot of talk about that. We're talking about it. They're going to be talking about it in the locker room, at the press conferences after this ball game. But then defensively, they're unable to make a stop. Those were big chunks. They got down there in a hurry, so it was a collapse by a lot of people there at the end for them not to be walking off this field victorious.
Joe, you made the point as you were calling the action there that there was no pressure at all to speak of on Cousins, and these chunk plays happened almost instantly. I wondered, might Atlanta even run the ball, because they had that option given the amount of time that was still left in the time that they got down the field so quickly. I just was wondering, from your vantage point, what looked different about the Eagles front there and their inability to get close to Kirk?
Well, I think you have to look at, we haven't seen anything yet from Bryce Huff. He's not getting any pressure. He was brought in on a 3-year, $50+ million deal. That hasn't spurned him into getting pressure. That's not working. Cousins had all day back there. So did Hurts. Neither team really had much of a pass rush. Neither team could stop the run when they had to. Philly had at least been good in the red zone, as you said, but then they get down there with an opportunity to make a stop, and they do not. So I think you have to tip your cap to the Atlanta Falcons. I've been doing NFL games for 31 years, and I don't think I've ever been as shocked as fast as I was tonight with the way this game ended. It was all just like a landslide with Philly, and you a couple of decisions. They tried to go for it on 4th and 4 early when he and I are looking at each other like, seemed like a chip shot field goal was the call, but they go for it. It's a different time in the league. And then they throw the ball on 3rd down, stops the clock as they don't make the catch. And Kirk Cousins took care of the rest. So you can look at it either way. I think the better way is to credit Kirk Cousins in this offense for the Atlanta Falcons coming off that brutal game in Week 1 to step up and get a tough win here on the road.
They're telling me I have to wrap, but Troy, I'll give you the last word. Cousins is a guy you can relate to all of it, what he goes through. To have that drive and just your second game after what Week 1 looked like, how do you frame that?
I thought he was outstanding. You know, that's why you get paid the big money, is when the game's on the line. That's when you've got to be able to come through. And I know that throughout his career, he's been criticized for not coming through enough. And for him to do it with a new team, because every time you go into a new locker room, you've got to prove yourself all over again, regardless of whatever you've done in your past. So this was his opportunity to be put in that situation. He came through on the road, a very tough environment to do so. He should be really proud of himself. I'm certain that he is, but this was a big win for him.
Troy Aikman, Joe Buck with Scott Van Pelt after the game. It's amazing where we look at Kirk Cousins this morning versus what would happen if Saquon makes that catch. And if you've seen the highlights or you're up to see it, he was open. It was in his hands. He's got to make that catch. He makes that catch, and then the narrative is totally different because then Philadelphia is able to run out the clock. Kirk Cousins doesn't get a chance to do what he did in the final minute and 45 seconds. It goes down with a lot of bad Monday night experiences for him, both here and in Minnesota, although I think he did beat Washington, or maybe that was a Thursday night game. But the primetime numbers for Kirk have not been good. And so now they're 0-2, and they're facing Kansas City. Season's over, and it's how long is it going to be before Michael Penix plays? But now it's totally different, right? Leads the game-winning drive. Atlanta's back in a position, at least, where they can be thinking playoffs and thinking about having a successful season. And it all comes down to one play. If Saquon makes the catch, we're not having this discussion. Saquon in the locker room.
Dropped the ball. Let my team down today. Shouldn't have put the defense in that position. Make that catch. Game's over. Relax. Went back to my old habits and just got to go back and get back to work.
Were you surprised with the play call? Or you expected a running play? Or?
No. Once I knew it, I thought it was a great play call. I just got to make the catch.
Yeah, and Saquon has not been exactly the hands guy over the years. I think the number I heard was 16 drops in recent years with the Giants, and now this big one here with Philadelphia. But, again, the victors go the spoils. Scott Van Pelt talking to Drake London, who made the game-winning touchdown catch. And really, you know, if the kicker, Koo, doesn't make a 48-yard extra point, then who knows what we're talking about. Maybe Philly comes back and wins in overtime. So Drake London plays both hero and near GOAT in this as well because he got an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty after the touchdown. But, again, it's all smiles to the victor. And Drake London sitting down with SVP after the game.
What allowed you all to do what you did?
First off, it was a clean operation from the jump. Right when we got the ball, we drove down the field. Mooney made some spectacular plays. Kirk put it in the right position. And our OC was calling some great calls. So we went down there and executed, and I'm still trying to soak it in. So.
I can imagine. I mean, the beauty is the flight home. You guys can kind of talk about what happened. But it felt like it happened, Drake, remarkably quickly. You guys got chunk plays, and when you're trying to execute where everything has to go right, how important is it that the sequence of events plays out, as you said, as a clean operation? There were no missed moments.
Yeah. It's very, very viable in that sense. We can't go out there and miss cues or anything like that, and I think at the end of the day, we just didn't blink as an offense. We knew what time it was, and we got in our 2 minute, and we just started going.
Look, it's such a cliche to say, you know, sign up for 60, you're going to play till zeros, this and that. But, I mean, in this place, you get down, and if Saquon squeezes that third down, it's probably a wrap, right? Because you guys don't have timeouts.
Yep.
But the second that he doesn't, is there something collectively in your group, the switch kind of flips, and you're like, all right, we get this opportunity. The mentality of how the roller coaster, what's that like?
It's just you gave us a chance, like you just said, an opportunity to go out there and win the game. And again, like you said, I know it's cliche, but all the way down to zeros, that's when you're playing to. So we took advantage of that mistake, and we went out there and scored.
That route, I said when you sat down, I said that was pretty clean because who you're working on is really good. And then you saw the end, and as soon as he bites, you have to be thinking what? Like,
just catch the ball, Drake. That's it. Catch the ball.
All right. None of us are ever going to stand in that moment. But when you're nude, you're wide open, and it's like if I catch this, we're ahead. You're a professional. You're really good at your job. But I have to imagine that you use, like you said, just catch the ball. Is your mind just a little bit of freak out in that moment?
A little bit. Sometimes the easiest ones are the hardest ones. Some people don't understand that, but in that moment right there, it was just once I made my move and I was open, just catch the ball, secure it, and let's go.
It's often said, and it's another cliche, but the most satisfying thing in any sport is to silence a road building. This place is very difficult to win. When they fall silent, except for the Atlanta fans that are here, what's that like?
I was trying to hear them at the end. I thought I was going to get a standing ovation, but I didn't. It was good to silence a crowd like this, and it was a good win for us to come out and build on.
Did they explain? Did you got 15? What did you do?
That was dumb on me.
I was looking. I saw you celebrating, but I don't know. Did you do something specific?
I think it was just an unsportsmanlike that they got me on celebrating. I kind of lost myself there. First Monday Night Football and all those things. So next time I'll be better and not have Koo kick a 50-yarder for a win.
Hey, that was big time. And he steps up and buries that, and that gives you the lead. Last big picture thought, your quarterback. Nothing in this league happens anonymously or quietly. He came for big dough. We all know what happens in the draft, and we all know week 1 was a struggle. For him, a new guy, trying to build belief in the locker room, how significant, Drake, is that last drive and what he did in helping lead you guys to the win, to give you a big bounce, given what your schedule is coming up?
It's huge. We definitely needed this building block to go forward, and for Kirk to go down there and handle it like he has been his whole career was huge for us. So we were all celebrating in that locker room, and I think we built something nice with this win right here.
And Kirk came into this game admitting that he's still not 100% from the Achilles surgery that he had last year in Minnesota. Did not look good at all in week 1 against Pittsburgh, could hardly move, and really wasn't spectacular until the final drive last night. His numbers are not overwhelming. Didn't throw an interception. Jalen Hurts did, so that was a big factor. But he was 20 of 29 for 241 yards and the 2 touchdown passes. The 41-yarder to Mooney in the third quarter was big, but the one at the end was only 7 yards to Drake London. London, by the way, was their leading receiver with only 54 yards. He had 6 catches for 54 yards. So it's not like, Kirk was airing it out all night long. And now he gets this, second wind here. And just how it's one game, but how it really changes the outlook for Atlanta, at least for a couple of weeks. They got a tough schedule. There's no question about it. But to come out of Philadelphia on a Monday night and get a win with a quarterback who's already, kind of on the brink there. Not that they're getting ready to bail on him since they guaranteed him $100 million. But after watching him in week 1, they're going, ooh, well, I don't know. And, the drafting of Michael Penix, as SVP mentioned, with Drake London, that was a huge story of the offseason. Like, really, what are they doing taking a quarterback in the first round when you just paid Kirk Cousins all that money? What are you thinking there? Well, and things move on. And actually, we're going to get to that coming up with the Bryce Young benching in Carolina. And the number one player in the draft last year, 2 games into his second season, is done. It's over for him in Carolina. And that's how things move on in the league. And, when you think about the quarterback position, and all signs after 2 games are pointing to Washington landing on the right number with Jayden Daniels. I mean, he's far and away the best of the rookie quarterbacks so far through 2 games, and looks like he's going to be one of those guys. And if you hit on one of those, oh boy, that's huge. But if you miss, oh my God, how damaging it is to a team. Not as damaging, though, as it used to be because you have a rookie salary cap. Used to be with no cap, you're paying these guys like $50 million, and if it doesn't work out, you're really in salary cap hell, and you've got to now find somebody else who you're going to pay a ton of money. So there is some relief in that, but the quarterback position, as we're going to get to, is the thing in the NFL. Either you have one or you don't, and if you have one, you're possibly in the mix, and if you have a really great one, you're in the mix forever. like we're seeing with Kansas City. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has kept them relevant for the last, more than relevant, but kept them at the top of the heap for the last 5-6 years, and it could continue for another 10 or 8, whatever it is. And if you don't, look how quickly teams move on. Look how quickly it is over for Bryce Young in Carolina. So we will get to that coming up. Also, Chris Sims, pretty good at analyzing quarterbacks. He's got to look at Jayden Daniels through 2 weeks. We'll get that in the 10 o'clock hour. Dan Quinn held his news conference last week. Washington, by the way, for this week is going to have kind of an adjusted schedule. Usually they get back on the practice field on Wednesdays. They're going to do it Thursday this week because they play on Monday night. So we'll get to also that and the thoughts that he had after watching the tape of the Sunday win over the Giants. And Steve Young, who it's a crime that he's not working for a network right now. He was terrific with ESPN. They decided to budget him out, but his insight into football is spectacular. And we'll get to some of the things he said yesterday with Dan Patrick. All that's still ahead. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I don't know how much you've watched of the Carolina Panthers this season. They've been pretty much unwatchable as they were on Sunday when they lost at home to the Chargers 26-3. But when you take a quarterback, number one, and you've moved up in the draft to take him, giving away picks to do it, you got to kind of hold your nose for a while, right? And see it through. Well, that's not happening in Carolina. 18 games, because he only played 16 last year. So 18 games into his career as the number one pick. It's over for Bryce Young in Carolina. After the game, Dave Canales, the coach, was saying, he's our guy. We're sticking with him. And then early yesterday afternoon, Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network came on the Rich Eisen Show to say this.
Dave Canales was adamant after the game yesterday, an ugly loss in the home opener. He kept saying, Bryce is our quarterback. Asked about whether he was going to remain the starter. Bryce is our quarterback. But my understanding is Dave Canales went back. He looked at the tape last night. He came in the building this morning, had some further conversations. And Dave Canales made the decision, it's time. We need to do something different here. And that's why Andy Dalton now is going to be taking over as the starting quarterback. There are a lot of layers to a decision like this because you're talking about massive organizational change. Everybody knows the boatload that they gave up to go and get Bryce Young, albeit with a different head coach in Frank Reich, a different GM in Scott Fitterer. But Dan Morgan, who is now the GM of the Panthers, was the assistant GM at the time. He was part of that decision. David Tepper was a part of that decision. It seems like it just boiled down to they couldn't go on like this. They couldn't continue to let Bryce Young go out there and get pounded the way that he did and have the offense unable to function the way that it was. Andy Dalton, at minimum, can operate the offense. He's 36 years old. He started like 150, 160 NFL games. You know what you're going to get from him. They feel like they had put more weapons around the quarterback position this year, not just in terms of trading for Deontay Johnson and drafting a running back in Jonathan Brooks, who we have not yet seen on the field. They've made other additions up front in terms of paying guards a lot of money. It was all built with give Bryce Young the best chance to succeed, but it still doesn't look right. And at this point, when you're talking about being a first-time head coach who's trying to maintain your credibility in the locker room, it would be hard for Dave Canales to look people in the eyes and say our best chance to win right now is with Bryce Young at quarterback. There's going to be a time, and it's not that far away, to talk about what this means for Bryce Young in the big picture of his career. Again, a player that this was not just Carolina. The consensus within the league was Bryce Young was the best quarterback in that 2023 NFL draft because of his accuracy, because of his work ethic, because of his processing ability. Even though he didn't have the stature, even though he didn't have the big arm, the belief was all those other traits were going to give Bryce Young a really good chance to have success at the NFL level. That has not happened yet. And that's not to say somewhere down the line it hasn't happened. But you look around the league, Rich, at how quickly teams have pulled the plug on starting quarterbacks, whether that is the 49ers moving on from Trey Lance, the Jets from Zach Wilson, More recently, Justin Fields, obviously, the Bears moved on from him. Kenny Pickett got 2 years, not even, before he ended up not being in the lineup down the stretch last year. As much as we can say, and there's truth to it, guys need time to develop. When it doesn't pass the eye test, and this entire Panthers team has not passed the eye test to this point this season, the one position where you can create a sea change is at quarterback. They're still really shorthanded on defense. They've still got issues they got to resolve as an offense here. But the one thing you could do to try to shake things up before the season really slides away from you is make a quarterback change. And so a very bold move by Dave Canales, making that decision overnight and into earlier today. He informed the quarterbacks, Rich, a few minutes before I put the tweet out that announced this news. You can imagine that this is a heartbreaking moment for Bryce Young. It's an opportunity for Andy Dalton, and there's no question it's a shakeup in Carolina.
No question. And shortly after Pelissero reported that on the Eisen show, this was Dave Canales, the coach, making it official.
After yesterday, just went home, watched the film, had some conversations with coaches, with Dan Brandt. So had to gather a lot of information through this morning and made that decision after looking at it that this is the best decision for our group, for our team going forward. We want to play more football. A lot of factors that go into it, for this decision, and ultimately just kind of lands on my shoulders to be able to make the best decision for our group to give us our best chance to win this week. And we focus on the weeks. We focus on the challenge at hand, and we feel like Andy gives us our best chance to meet the challenge.
Translation, he's got a locker room full of players, and he can't look them in the eye and say, we think we got a shot to beat the Raiders this week with a quarterback who has been abysmally bad on a bad team and a terrible organization. But the numbers for Bryce Young this year, 31 of 56, 245 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's been sacked 6 times. And the most important number is they produced 13 points in 2 games. And at home on Sunday, they produced 3. Now, it's the worst organization in the NFL, maybe the worst organization in sports. Now that Dan Snyder's out of the NFL, it's possible David Tepper is the worst owner in sports. And Canales is the 3rd coach for Bryce Young in 2 years. Now, what makes this really intriguing is if they don't win with Andy Dalton, what does David Tepper do with Dave Canales, who he just hired and doesn't seem to have a problem firing coaches? So what would prevent him from doing that? And maybe they're on to somebody else. I mean, this guy is trying to out-Snyder and seems to be doing a pretty good job of that. You wonder if Bryce Young winds up in the right location, that maybe it's not this bad. But some of the things that were of concern, like his size, are there. And also the fact that he played at a school like Alabama where there's just more talent than anybody else. And aside from games like against Georgia and when you get into the playoffs, and he damn near won his playoff game in his senior year, nearly won. He was that good. And that's part of the reason he went so high. But when you look at the all-time bust, and he's got to be in the conversation for it. His career hasn't completely played out. It's possible he winds up someplace else and gets the right kind of coaching and turns out to be good, maybe even great. But it doesn't appear that that's going to happen. So far, it looks like he can't play. And so here's the list that he's going to be joining here. You can rank these in any way you want. To me, a bust is a bust. It's like being pregnant. How pregnant are you? Well, how much of a bust are you? There have been quarterbacks who have been disappointments when they've been taken high. Now, there's one that's always forgotten on this list, and you really have to be an old-timer to remember this, but of course I do. In 1966, Gary Beeman won the Heisman Trophy at UCLA. Sonny Jurgensen at that point was like 33, 34 years old, but the thinking was pre-Brady that when you got into your mid-30s, you were coming down to the end of your career. So they actually traded up. They traded with the Rams, who had a first-round pick, and they traded with the Rams to draft Gary Beeman, who they thought would be an understudy to Sonny Jurgensen for 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, because you would do that in those days in the NFL. You didn't have these enormous salaries. So if a guy had to sit for a few years, so be it. So they brought him in to be the next great quarterback for Washington, and turned out he couldn't play quarterback. Couldn't play at all. Never took a snap in a regular season game as a quarterback. Vince Lombardi came in Beeben's second year and said, okay, this could be my new Paul Hornung, and we'll have him like as a running back, wide receiver, maybe even a kick returner, have him do a bunch of different things. And he played some in that 69 season. I don't think he took a snap in 68. I have to look that up, but I don't think he did. But anyway, he was out of the league after that. 2 years. First-round quarterback, Heisman Trophy winner, could not play. And that could be Bryce Young. Some others on the list, I think Jamarcus Russell, at least until now, and maybe Bryce Young unseats him, but Jamarcus Russell, who was taken number one out of LSU by the Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, owned by Al Davis in those days. Al was just mesmerized by his arm. He had a rocket arm, and he took Jamarcus Russell out of LSU, where he played really just 1 year, and he was a complete bust, but because more so that he just wasn't able to handle it emotionally, wasn't mature enough to do it, got all the money, held out for a long time because in those days they didn't have a rookie salary cap, so he was guaranteed something like $50 million. And it was the stories that have been told where he just wouldn't study. At that time, when they would have him study tape, you did it on a DVD. So as the story goes, the coaches gave him a DVD and said, go home and study this. And they asked him the next day, well, what'd you think of what you saw on tape? He said, oh, yeah, I really learned a lot. Well, it was a blank tape. And those are the kind of things that drove him out of the league pretty quickly. Ryan Leaf, I think, may be unfairly considered the biggest bust of all time. He does a lot of broadcasting now and kind of uses that to I don't want to say boost himself, but make himself more noticed. He suffers from Peyton Manning comparison because in 98, it was considered to be by some a coin flip, whether you took Manning or Leaf number one. Manning winds up in the Hall of Fame as one of the great quarterbacks of all time, and Leaf is a monster bust, partly because he didn't handle it emotionally very well. He got into some drug issues and things like that. Here's another one, Matt Leinart, who, if he had come out of USC in 2005, he would have been the number one pick. He stayed another year. They didn't win the national championship. They lost one of the best games I have ever seen in any sport when they played the Rose Bowl against Vince Young in Texas, and they lost that, and he slid down to number 10, made only 17 starts in his career, went 7-10, was out of football in 2012, and now you see him on Fox, in some ways making fun of his NFL career. Johnny Manziel, he didn't go high. He went 22nd, but he was still a first-round pick, 2-6 as a starter. And then right here, Heath Shuler. Heath Shuler is the biggest bust in recent history for Washington. I would say Gary Beeben was a bigger one, but the money was different, and Heath Shuler held out, got his money, and turned out could not play, and wound up losing his job to a seventh-round pick in Gus Frerotte. So now we turn the attention to Bryce Young and what happened here. Steve Young yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show with an analysis of why someone who was so highly touted, how when he was taken number one by Carolina, nobody said, oh, my God, what are they doing? And C.J. Stroud, and this could wind up being, as time goes by, if C.J. Stroud is this good, that this could look like the Manning-Leaf comparison in reverse, in that the number one is terrible, and the number 2 pick goes on to maybe be a Hall of Fame player. So, it's the randomness of this. It's the organization you wind up with. A lot of things enter into it. But this is Steve Young's analysis of why it is not happening for Bryce Young, at least so far.
Yeah, it's the classic conundrum, right? Because you get into your high draft pick, you come out of all the success in college. You feel like you should be really good, and you don't get any help, and now you don't know, and then you lose your job, and you bounce around the league, and then some guys never really get straightened up, and that's the somewhat the curse of being the number one pick. But if he was, again, do you think he sent you some smoke signals? He's put up some flares that he can get it right. I can take care of you. I'm going to say I'm not sure that he has, and that's what you have to wonder about.
When did you learn that there was only so much you could do on a play before you kind of have to take the loss on that play. Whether, because in college you could improvise, extend a play, you were more athletic. But you get to the pros, and eventually you have to learn how to go, nope, not going to happen on this play.
Well, again, the prototypes have changed, Dan. I was the oddity back in the day. Now, I would be prototype now. And so the challenge that you just asked is the question of every quarterback. Justin Fields last year when I talked to him, all the guys, Patrick Mahomes every week's got to figure out, when do I'm Superman. I can't, call a play, I'll get the most out of it, and then I got another play for you, and then maybe another one at the tail end when I can throw it down the field 80 yards on the on the run. When do I quit? What does Josh Allen say? Okay, I know they ask too much of me. I'm Superman every week. When is too much? And that is the $60 million question now at quarterback. And the guys that have figured out, and I think Patrick has done that. Patrick went back to school in 2000. Andy Reid, said to him, hey, Patrick, what you really need to do is focus on the play that's called in the huddle, get every inch of that, and then go do something else, and then throw it away. And so that discipline that Patrick put into his game, I think made him the best in the league. And there's others that have the capability of being the best in the league that haven't figured out that discipline. And, that's, and people say, why not? How? It's so obvious. Well, that's the challenge of the toughest job in sports, is to try to figure out when and how that story ends. It's easier for guys like Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, Tom Brady. They don't have all the options, and so they can be more disciplined much more quickly.
But so you rushed for 4,000 yards. How much of that was by design when you were playing?
None of it. But yet. That's where you get capitulation from defenses. That's where in today's game, especially, you have to. You saw Caleb at the end of the game yesterday. You saw CJ at the end of the game. It's like the NBA. You play on 3.5 quarters, and all of a sudden there's the finishers, the guys that can throw it all over the field, big, strong, athletic guys. And then they have to get on the horse. They have to go out and take those free yards. They're out there, and if you're not going to take them, it's just going to make it that much more hard. That's what Patrick Mahomes, he didn't play well, but he made some key first down runs, some things that really moved the chains, made the difference. And that's out there. And if you can't do it, you really can't thrive in today's game. But if you don't, if you're not capable of getting, and like the game has changed so much that there are free yards out there for quarterbacks. You got to go get them, like college used to be. But yet you have to be in college, Dan. There's runners who can throw. And there's a lot of them. In the pros, you got to be a thrower. You got to be a sophisticated passer of the football who can run. And that's the challenge of today's game, is everyone can run. Most of the guys that are being drafted today high, they're all big, strong guys that can run. But can you become a sophisticated passer of the football?
And that really boils it down pretty well. Steve Young, again, very, very insightful. And whatever salary he was making at ESPN, I just don't get it. I mean, he's so smart and so good. Tony and Mike used to love to have him on PTI. I guess they can't do that anymore now that he's no longer with the network. I guess you could have him on the podcast, which is now, by the way, at the Tony Show, which used to be 11 here, is now at 2:00. But think about what he said here. He said in college, there's a lot of runners who can throw. In the pros, you got to be a thrower who can run. And Young stirred up a lot of stuff last year when he was on, again, with Patrick, and he said, if Peyton Manning comes along today and Tom Brady comes along today, he said, I don't know if they can play in today's game. I think what he meant was that they wouldn't be as great as they were during their careers, but there's something to be said for that the way the game is played these days, you have to be, as he says, a thrower who can run, not a runner who can throw. And, you hear all about these quarterbacks coming out of college. Oh, yeah, he can run and he's got a rocket arm. Doesn't necessarily, make them into great pros. And one of the things that Bryce Young suffers from, besides size, although some of that was debunked with the way that we've seen quarterbacks come along, like Drew Brees and Russell Wilson, and a handful of guys who can overcome their size. Although Russell Wilson probably looking down the barrel at the end of his career, the way things have been going for him the last few years. But Young is small. I think he's under 6 feet, and all reports are he doesn't have a rocket arm. The strengths that he has is that he works really hard at his craft, and that's important, but maybe that takes you only so far. Jayden Daniels, he has this great speed. He also is known for, coming in at 5 o'clock in the morning and really working hard on looking at the tape and so forth, and he's a work in progress, but so far he's the leader of the pack of the 3 rookie quarterbacks who are playing right now. I'll go over those numbers at 10 o'clock, and also what Chris Sims said about him yesterday on Pro Football Talk, quarterback himself in the NFL, and does a really good job of analyzing them. So, there's a lot of things to consider here, including the fact that he's with a terrible organization. But 19 games into an NFL career as the number one pick, a number one pick who the team traded up to get, and it's over. That's the reality. That's the reality of football in 2024. Dan Quinn's explanation of how they can fix all the penalties. 5 false starts in the red zone in Sunday's win. Yeah, it's a win. And it's a win that rarely happens in the NFL. It's only the second time that a team has given up 3 touchdowns, hasn't scored a touchdown, and won the game. And it's really because the only thing that they had was a kicker, Austin Seibert, who had been signed off the street 5 days earlier, and the fact that the Giants didn't have a kicker. The opening kickoff of the game, which was a touchdown by Austin Eckler that was called back because of a ridiculous, it was the right call, but it was a ridiculous hold during the kickoff. If that hold isn't made, Eckler scores, Washington's up 7-0, and maybe it's a different kind of game. It's a lopsided game, and the Giants are playing with, kind of one hand tied behind their back, or in this case, I guess one leg tied behind their back, because Graham Gano hurt his hamstring on that kickoff trying to chase down Eckler, which was kind of stupid because he came into the game with a groin injury. He was on the injured list, and they tried to. They crossed their fingers and thought, okay, let's see if this works. It didn't work. They lost him on the opening kickoff, and that was it. So Sam Fortier in the Post today, and he does a really good job of breaking down tape and looking at the all-22s and all that. He has an analysis of this defense, and in the headline, it kind of tells it all. In Quinn's defense, an absence of havoc and plenty of concern, and it's addressing in many ways the lack of talent that they have on this team. And you could blame Adam Peters for that, but he had to totally overhaul this roster. They did not spend a lot of money in free agency. And, the feeling this year is let's establish a culture more than anything else and show some signs of hope for the future. Candace Buckner has a good column about that today, and we'll get to that at 10 o'clock. But a couple of paragraphs in the early part of Fortier's story today in the Post. He says, don't get fooled by Sunday's box score. Washington's defense easily could have cost its home opener, and the Giants scored just 18 points in part because their kicker was injured on the opening kickoff. If Graham Gano had been healthy, the Giants could have kicked a go-ahead field goal late in the fourth quarter rather than going for it on 4th and 4 from the 22-yard line when rookie wide receiver Malik Neighbors' drop gave Washington its biggest stop. Yeah, as great as Neighbors was on Sunday, and he was owning the secondary for Washington, dropping the football there wide open. I mean, that's a catch that he could make in his sleep. Drop the ball, and things change there, and the outlook is totally different. I mean, we're talking how bad it could be if they lose that game. That they could possibly be starting like 0-6 or something like that, but they didn't. And this is more from what he writes in his story today, more from Fortier. The defense is a big concern. In 15 drives, it has allowed 7 touchdowns and 3 field goals. It has forced just 1 3-and-out, and 1 turnover. The stars are not wreaking havoc, and the stopgaps are not stopping gaps. And it won't be easy to get right against the upcoming slate of offenses: Cincinnati, at Arizona on a short week, home against Cleveland, and at Baltimore. That's what's ahead. That's a tough stretch. Those are teams, all of them, could be in the playoffs, though Baltimore at 0-2 is a surprise, and they're going to have to get right. But when he writes here that the Stars are not wreaking havoc, realize that a lot of the money, in fact, the big chunks of money on defense are on that defensive line. They elected to pay Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, both of them first-round draft picks out of Alabama, former teammates, keep them together and keep that defensive line strong. They were pretty much invisible on Sunday. And I thought this comment that Deron Payne made in the locker room to Scott Abraham is really telling to me when he talks about what the Giants did strategically against Washington on Sunday.
They had a scheme for us, man. They wanted to double the inside guys. They didn't want us to do nothing but shoot, man. If that's what they're going to do, man, we're going to win every time. But it is what it is.
No, you're not going to win every time. You're going to play better teams than the Giants. And if the Giants are saying to Washington, as they did on Sunday, we don't think you have anything else. So we're going to double your inside guys, your highly paid tackles, and we're going to dare the other guys to beat us. Well, they didn't. They really didn't. I mean, yeah, they won the game. They dominated time of possession on offense, which helped. It kept that defense off the field most of the game. Washington held the ball for 37 and a half minutes. 37 and a half minutes. That's a great – you're not going to have that every game. You're not going to have your defense on the field as few snaps as what happened on Sunday. And also in the secondary, and we'll get to what Dan Quinn said about the secondary, but he said this is what Sam Fortier writes. He says, opponents seem to know quick throws on the perimeter can mitigate the Commanders' highest-paid defensive players, tackles Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. Neither has made a big difference in the first two games. They have combined for 5 tackles and 2 quarterback hits. It's hard to parse how much is their fault and how much they can actually do against these quick throws. And, again, what you saw on Sunday was these throws to Malik Neighbors, who was making these pivot moves on Michael Davis and running right around him. I mean, they had absolutely no answer for him. So, grab a Snickers. This is going to be a long year defensively for them. And, going to Cincinnati and facing Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and that offense who went toe-to-toe with the Chiefs in Kansas City on Sunday, probably should have won the game. There's that. And by the way, did anybody see what Marvin Harrison did on Sunday after doing basically nothing in the opening game? He and Kyler Murray, I mean, I don't want to go as far as to say Randy Moss, but there was some Moss-like views that I saw watching the Red Zone channel of what he was able to do in that late game. I mean, Harrison was the highest highest drafted non-quarterback this year, and looks like he's going to be a handful to deal with. And, you're going to face him on a short week. I don't know how the schedule works this way, that you got to play a road game after playing a Monday night game on the road. A road game out west doesn't make sense, but that's how the schedule works. And so it could be a rough couple of weeks for them coming up. We'll get more comments from Dan Quinn about how they stack up in the next hour. I want to throw this in. Pat Forty's got a column today about the Heisman Trophy race, and he's 100% right. Unfortunately, the Heisman Trophy in recent years is pretty much a quarterback award. There have been a handful of players who won. Devontae Smith won as a wide receiver at Alabama a few years ago, but by and large, it goes to quarterbacks. And Charles Woodson back in '98 was a shocker, beating out Peyton Manning for the Heisman. It was a done deal. Manning coming back for his senior year. Oh, give him the Heisman now. Woodson won it because he was a defensive back who also played some wide receiver, and that helped him. He became, I think, only the second defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy, primarily a defensive player, but because he played offense. Well, Pat Forty is saying, you can look at all these guys, Quinn Ewers and others.
Man, they wanted to double the inside guys. They didn't want us to do nothing.
I didn't want to hit Dwayne Payne again. That you can look at these quarterbacks. Quinn Ewers, he got hurt on Saturday, and he may have been the front runner for the Heisman. He may not even keep his job. I mean, Arch Manning was great coming in off the bench in that game. But what Travis Hunter is doing is what the Heisman is all about. He is the best player in college football right now for Colorado. He says, this is what 40 writes, is, while the junior defensive back / wide receiver hasn't been accomplished at the highest level of football in ages, quite likely since the single platoon days died in college football 60 years ago. It's rarely even been tried, at least at an immersive level. Hunter is playing both ways all game, every game. He's excelling at both. He's played 123 of 138 snaps this past week, according to Colorado, racking up 100 yards receiving, an interception, and 5 tackles. He's played 388 snaps this year, an average of 129 a game, far more than anybody else in college football. He's not just tireless, 40 writes. He's great at both jobs. Hunter is second in the nation in receptions at 10 a game. He's ninth in receiving yards at 114, tied for second in touchdown catches with 5. He has 11 tackles, 2 passes broken up, 1 interception, and has effectively discouraged opposing quarterbacks from testing him. He's, kind of like the new Dion. He says the last player to excel like this on both sides at the highest level was Paul Hornung in 1956. Hornung led the Irish that season in rushing, passing, scoring, kickoff returns, punt returns, and punting. The team went 2-8. Jim Brown probably should have won the award that year at Syracuse, but there was a lot of racism still in 56, and being at Notre Dame and the hype machine that goes along with it, Hornung won. But still, he's the only player to win the Heisman from a losing team. Hunter may wind up being the second. It also may be unsustainable over a full season, but he did play more than 1,100 snaps last year in 9 games, averaging 122 a game. He's 100% right. If this award is what it's supposed to be for the best player in college football, it's Travis Hunter. There doesn't seem to be much debate about it. Coming up, what Chris Sims says about what he's seen from Jayden Daniels so far. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, in case you're not familiar with our new lineup, the Bram Weinstein Show is now at 11 o'clock every day, and the Tony Kornheiser Show, which has been heard for years here at 11 o'clock, is now at 2 o'clock. Every afternoon, and I'm in my regular spot on here from 9 to 11 every day and enjoying where I am. So there's that. Now, let's get to the quarterback issue and whether or not Jayden Daniels is proving to be a home run. Don't know if he's a home run yet, but he looks like a solid double that could be legged out to a home run over the course of time. And, we spent a lot of time in the last hour talking about what happened with Bryce Young, who's now been benched with his team after what, 18 games? He played 16 last year. He's played 2 this year, and the number one pick looks like he can't play. Jayden Daniels, number 2 pick this year, so far looks like he can play. And here are the numbers for the rookie quarterback so far. Kind of a tough night for Caleb Williams. The other night he was sacked 7 times and threw 2 interceptions in Chicago's loss to Houston, and the game was a home game for them. He was his numbers so far in the 2 games, Caleb Williams, 56%. He has thrown no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and he has run 10 times for 59 yards. Jayden Daniels has completed 75% of his passes, hasn't thrown a touchdown pass, but also hasn't thrown an interception, and has run for 132 yards and also scored a couple of touchdowns. Bo Nix, who's starting for the Denver Broncos, he played 5 years, and I think he played more games than any other college quarterback, something like 61 games over the course of his college career and 2 stops, both at Auburn and Oregon. He has completed 59% of his passes. He has thrown no touchdowns and 4 interceptions and has run 9 times for 60 yards and a touchdown. So it's pretty clear Jayden Daniels is out in front in the 2 games. It's only 2 games. But Chris Sims of Pro Football Talk, taking a look at what he's seen so far from Jayden Daniels yesterday, said this.
Jayden Daniels has been very smooth, by far the best rookie so far. He's comfortable in the offense. It's an offense he ran in college. He's throwing the ball on the money. He doesn't seem to be making any dicey decisions, makes a few plays with his legs and does that. That's the positive things for Jayden Daniels. Not a lot of negatives. And early on in the game, the Giants couldn't get off the field on third down because of stuff like this. Maybe it was a good throw, or he'd make an incredible run and make a play there that way. But the throwing, as you see, is really good. The playmaking and scrambling and throws off of that is really good. They got something there in Washington with Jayden Daniels, definitely.
Yeah, I know that term, you got something. Dan Snyder has said that many times over the years. We got ourselves a quarterback. It's a little early to say that, but after a long history of whiffs, particularly in the draft, it looks like they got their guy. A lot has to happen over the course of the season, including staying healthy. And this is something that Candace Buckner, I think, addressed very well in her column today in the Washington Post. And the headline on it is, "Not yet ready to chase glory. Commanders are selling hope." And we've had this before, right? I mean, and we had false hope, although we did have great hope for a year. Robert Griffin III in 2012. If you were here, you remember how wild that was. Even Obama was talking about what he meant to the community, what he meant to the National Football League. I remember the Thanksgiving game that they played in Dallas, and he threw 4 touchdown passes, and Jerry Jones was gushing. It was like, yeah, I mean, we have to play against them, and it's going to be tough for the next decade, but wow, look at that. And then it dried up. So, you got to pump your brakes a little bit on this, but because of the new structure of the organization, because you have a new ownership that seems to know what they're doing and seems to be very professional about it, an actual front office structure where you have a general manager, a true general manager, and you have a coach who does nothing but coach rather than the disaster of Ron Rivera, who was in charge of everything. And I mentioned this yesterday. If you whiff once on a draft pick, sometimes you can get away with it. But look at what happened on Sunday, where you had Chase Young, now on his third team, playing in New Orleans. That he was the number 2 pick of the draft, the first pick taken by Ron Rivera in 2020. Jamin Davis was inactive, a healthy scratch on Sunday for them, and that was explained yesterday by Dan Quinn, who said, well, we brought Johnny Newton up for the first time, and he's coming off an injury, so he's on a pitch count, so we had to have an extra tackle. So you're telling me that a first-round draft pick from 3 years ago, who you'd converted from linebacker to defensive end or pass rusher, because he had been a disappointment at linebacker, is so invaluable that you kept him inactive because you just needed an extra defensive lineman because Johnny Newton couldn't take as many snaps as you need him to do. That tells you something there. Jahan Doxson, who was traded to Philadelphia for draft picks, not here yet. I'm looking at the numbers from last night, Philadelphia receiving. Doxson had 1 catch for 6 yards. Doesn't look like Philadelphia got much there, and Washington got draft picks, which we'll see what happens after that. So, he was a guy who was going to be your number 2 receiver, could not play. And now Emmanuel Forbes is on the injured list, but it looks like he can't play as well. So, a lot of what you've seen building hope with draft picks under the Rivera era, that hope is gone. And the hope now rides mainly with Jayden Daniels. And this is what she writes today. When you embody the future of a franchise, any hit such as one Daniels absorbed during the second quarter of Washington's 21-18 win feels bigger, almost as if the decades of despair are lurking in the shadows, ready to ambush hope and place it in a sleeper hold. Even with a new regime, a new stadium name, and all those raise hail banners covering what was once FedEx Field signage, one unfortunate hit can spiral this franchise back to despair, right? And who among us did not think when Jayden Daniels got nailed in the ribs on Sunday that either the season was going to be derailed or he was going to be out for a while or who knows? And, fortunately for him, fortunately for the franchise, he just got the wind knocked out of him. He missed 1 play. He came back. But those are the kind of hits that you look at each week, and there are going to be more of them. There are 15 regular season games to play. Keep that in mind. It's going to be tough for him to stay healthy for all of that. She writes, games such as that one and surely there will be more. Just show how far the Commanders have to go in creating a product worth our time. And then she gets into, this was a story a couple of weeks ago, a man by the name of Raul Entine, who was a vice president, spewed a lot of nonsense that was picked up in a recording on what was like a setup date. And, he called the fans mouth breathers, said about the players, religious zealots, dumb as hell, homophobes, the whole thing. But one thing that he did say is that he was having to sell hope when none was evident. That more so the Snyder era than now. So what we have now is hope, and that's one big thing. You hear what Chris Sims is saying. You see the numbers, how he stacks up against the other rookie quarterbacks. And although it was a crazy win on Sunday where you don't score a touchdown and kick field goals and you self-destruct in the red zone all the time, there is hope. And like she says, Washington fans won't have to donate their Daniels jerseys to Goodwill in a year or two like they might have done with the old models of the past with names like Cousins, Smith, Keenum, Heineke, and Wentz. Cousins, by the way, that's more on the franchise than Cousins. I think that if they would have managed to lock him up with a really good front office, which they didn't have, things might be different. I don't know if they would have won a Super Bowl by now, but I think you'd had a successful team that was knocking on the door. We might be complaining about the fact that they're in the playoffs every year and don't win, but if things had been different here with a better front office structure, it might have worked out well with Cousins. Keenum was a stopgap. Alex Smith should have worked out, got hurt. And Taylor Heineke was not an NFL starting quarterback. That's a guy who they plugged in because they didn't have anything else. And given his talent and everything else, he did pretty well. But that's not an answer. And then Carson Wentz was a complete disaster, as most thought it would be when they traded for him. She concludes the column by saying, hope can be tantalizingly close, as bright and blaring as the burgundy and gold paint in the end zone where the Commanders had plenty of opportunities to score. And hope can also be fleeting, with fans retreating into stunning silence when Daniels lay on the grass in pain. It's hard to win in the NFL, so Washington will take its victory over the Giants. But the 2024 Commanders are tasked with more than squeaking out a win here and there. They have to convincingly show that tomorrow will be better than years before. In short, to earn back the trust of the region, the Commanders must convince Washington that it's okay to hope again. And look, I don't know how many wins they're going to have. If I had to bet, I'd bet they'll lose more than they win this year. But Josh Harris held a news conference before the opening game, and it was like a week before the opening game, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, well, this better be better than last year with all that they've done, with the way they've changed everything around. Remember, you had a lame duck coach in Ron Rivera who knew it, a quarterback in Sam Howell who was not a starting quarterback in the NFL, but they propped up because they weren't going to spend any money to sign one. And so now you have a better front office structure. You have a head coach who's only coaching, not doing what Ron Rivera was doing, everything else. And you have a quarterback who's maybe the quarterback of the future. You hope is the quarterback of the future, and you are invested as such. But, if you're going to look at this in terms of wins and losses this year, I think you're going to have a lot of frustration. Let's get to the Dan Quinn news conference from yesterday. Coaches talk every Monday just to the media. They do this by Zoom call. Rivera, I guess, used to have people in, but the reporters don't have to show up at the park because there's no practices to watch or anything, so it makes it more convenient for everybody. So they do it in a Zoom call. And one of the early questions was about all the penalties. They've had 17 penalties in the two games, and on Sunday, 5 false start penalties inside the red zone. 5 of them. And this is Quinn's answer to how you get those fixed.
Those are the ones, so I would call like the pre- and post-snap ones, like they'll fall under discipline, Nikki. And those are the ones that we have to get rid of because there could be a check at the line of scrimmage and you jumped, like, hey, man, like we're going to get into the best play, have the discipline to stay in it. Like most things, more practice at it for sure, even if you have to check in and out of a play that you don't need to for that simple purpose of doing it right. More often I found the false starts are I'm wanting to go too quickly. I'm just get the check, get to the call to go. I can live you don't want them, but I can live with the combative ones. I can live with a holding or a DPI. I didn't like the one on Nick on the opening kickoff, but when you're trying to be physical, that part I can live with. The pre and the post snap ones, that's a no bueno for me. So we'll really, kind of focus in on that. The false starts were the ones that set us back in this game from a penalty point of view.
Yeah, lucky to win. I mean, you don't usually win with that kind of self-destruction in the red zone. It's hard to get in the red zone. When you get there, you want to score touchdowns. They wind up kicking field goals, mainly because of that, because they did it to themselves. It wasn't necessarily that the Giants' defense stopped them. Question number 2 about the secondary, which, remember, there's a lot of discussion last week. Well, there was a lack of communication and guys didn't know where to go. Secondary got worked by Malik Neighbors. He would have 117 yards, and if he makes that catch at the end of the game on fourth down, they probably win. And this is Quinn's analysis of how he hopes things got better in week 2 with the secondary.
Well, I thought it was better in terms of communication, first off, Ben. At the Tampa game, we had a couple routes that we didn't match, quite like we'd like. So that part was significantly better. To see us, stay on top of routes and do things, they did a nice job of trying to get some play action shots. But you can live with the ones that are comebacks, and even if it's a, 10 or 15 yard comeback, but you're on top of the route. But the ones that go over the top of your head, those are the ones that you can't live with. And so I was pleased to see that come into life more. I felt the guy's speed in the game, and I thought Quan did a good job coming out of the middle field again. That is one of the real strengths for him.
Okay, but I like Quinn. I think he's going to be a good coach here, and he's great with the media. He really treats them with a lot of respect. But if you throw a 25-yard completion to Malik Neighbors, what's the difference between that and you throw to Neighbors, he makes a pivot around the defensive back and picks up 25 yards on the play? They're not throwing over the top on the secondary, but they work the secondary pretty well. Daniel Jones, who came into the game, off a terrible, terrible performance against Minnesota, at times looked pretty good. Now, they had a turnover. It wasn't his fault. It was a fumble. But you made a bad quarterback look pretty decent. And no matter how they get the yards on the reception, whether it's over the top or the way that Neighbors was pretty much working them, it's still big games in the passing game. So that's got to be a concern. And you hear what Deron Payne says. Well, their strategy was to lock up him and Allen and leave everybody else open. Well, you saw kind of what happened there with the defense. Now, this is on the fact that, yes, they didn't score any touchdowns. They self-destructed in the red zone. But, and this is important because, that defense, as weak as it is, the more you can keep it off the field, the better. And as he points out, they did hold the ball for 37 and a half minutes.
There was probably 35 runs and 23 completions. And if you're 55, 56, I think we ended up being like 58, somewhere in that neighborhood, Sam. What then happens is time of possession, now can become a factor, more plays. And so although we missed the mark in the red zone, I was pleased to see us, taking care of the ball and having long, extended drives. So we didn't punt. We kicked a hell of a lot, which, trust me, after what this team's been through, I'm not bitching about making field goals, okay? But I will say that the completion, the poise of Jayden and putting the ball at the right spot, that's a really big deal. And I think the more we play, we are still a new team together, the more reps, the more game experience that we get, these are really valuable times for us. And so the games are so important, not just because of the win-loss, but how we want to play. So I just kind of anticipate us continuing this trajectory upwards.
If you can hold the ball like that. Let's see what happens against Cincinnati. Holding the ball for 37 and a half minutes is big. Now, I will say this. It's really good to see the way they're using Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson, who said, I haven't gotten 17 carries in a long time, is a true indictment of what went on last year with Eric Bieniemy. The fact that he didn't get more carries is ridiculous. And backs like that, the more carries that you get, the better chance is you're going to break one. It's like, pounding on a wall. Eventually you pound it down. And that was key. The combo of Eckler and Robinson. I know that's 1980s football, but with a rookie quarterback who's still learning to be a passer, and as Steve Young said, there's a lot of great runners in college who are throwers. You need to be a thrower who can also run in the pros. And he's not yet there. He was in college. He was a thrower who was a great runner. But, I mean, realistically, he was more runner than passer. And now in the pros, he's making that transition. And to have a running game is key to take the pressure off him and hold the football. This defense is not good. You want to keep that defense off the field. And Monday night is going to be an interesting look against a really good team. All right, that's it for me. I'll be back tomorrow, I hope. And Bram Weinstein is coming up next. Tony at 2 o'clock. I'll see you at 9 a.m.